Hey, what is up, everybody? So today I want to take a look at a few different things that have gone down for the Packers in the past couple days. There are a few different meetings that the Packers have had with potential first-round prospects. So I want to go over a few of those, and then there's also a new signing yesterday reported by the Packers on their website. And if you guys are new here, I put out Packers content most days. The past few weeks I've put out much less than typical, just taking a little bit of some time off recently. But this week and in the next week with the draft, I will be out with a lot more consistent videos. And so to start off here, the new signing, it's a very minor signing, but it's John Fitzpatrick, who's a tight end. He was signed off of the Falcons practice squad last October, played in 9 games for the Packers, 73 snaps on offense, only had 1 reception for 2 yards, so mainly a blocking type tight end, and then he had 60 snaps on special teams. And so the Packers signed him yesterday as reported by Packers.com, and this is just going to be a depth piece at tight end. The Packers have Tucker Kraft, best tight end on the roster. Then you got Luke Musgrave, who showed some good things from time to time in his first year, dealt with some injuries, and hopefully he can be someone that can be one of those field stretchers at tight end because he's fast. He's not as great on his feet like Kraft, who can run through people and carry people with him. And so Musgrave is there with Ben Sims as well. And so we'll see if he can compete for one of those final roster spots when training camp comes around as the Packers. All the different Packers players vie for those 53 final spots. So that's pretty much it there with the signing. And then here we have from Matt Schneidman of The Athletic. This is from earlier today. He says Packers are hosting Ole Miss defensive tackle Walter Nolan and Oregon defensive end Jordan Burch on 30 visits today. Every team, of course, has 30 visits they can have with different draft prospects. He says per source, this is Dane Brugler, gave Nolan a first/second round grade and Burch a second. So first off, looking at Walter Nolan, defensive tackle, Dane Brugler, who writes and works for The Athletic. He has a draft guide called The Beast, and I've read through some of it, but looking at a lot of his grades here, and just his thoughts on some of these prospects, specifically Walter Nolan, he is Walter Nolan as the 4th best defensive tackle, 4th best interior defensive lineman. He has him ranked 31 overall, so likely a first-round guy. PFF on their draft guide or draft board have him as the 8th best player. So, of course, with all these players, there's some differing opinions here. But let me read this excerpt from Brugler from his draft guide, The Beast. He says, with his length and surge off the ball, Nolan creates immediate force and can be a play wrecker with how quickly he penetrates gaps, the type of leverage that creates holding calls. He doesn't rely on just quickness to win, but there are inefficiencies in his attack, especially when he is late to read the play. Overall, Nolan has areas of his game that require maturing, but he flashes big-time disruption in his initial bursts and fast physical hands to regularly affect the backfield action. He'll be attractive for NFL teams looking for an active gap shooter with high-end upside. And so Nolan is someone that I do think could be a great add for the Packers. Personally, I really want to see the Packers draft a defensive lineman in round 1, even though wide receiver could make sense. But I think that just the biggest weakness in my mind right now, when you just look at the entire Packers roster, is the defensive line. I think that the Packers have some solid edge rushers. Rashawn Gary's solid. Lucas Van Ness hasn't been solid. And Kingsley Enagbare, he's been okay. I just think they need more consistency there. I do like Brenton Cox and what he was doing later on last year. Hopefully the success he was having can continue in 2025. But edge is a need. Defensive tackle is a need. And when you look at what's happened so far this offseason, at defensive tackle for the Packers, you have TJ Slayton leaving, signing with the Bengals. And Slayton was very, very solid against the run. He was mainly a run-stopping defensive tackle, not really the kind of guy who's really effective against, as a pass rusher. But still losing him, that's a massive loss for this Packers run defense that had one of its best years in a long, long time. Because I know for me, watching the Packers, the past 10 to 15 years, a majority of the time, the Packers run defense has consistently been one of the worst. And thank goodness under Jeff Hafley, that was an area that we really saw a ton of improvement for this Packers defense. But when you lose TJ Slayton, who ESPN had him as the best run stopping defensive tackle among defensive tackles. His run stop win rate was the highest among defensive tackles. And so when you lose that, clearly that's something that the Packers need to find a way to replace what he was able to do. Now, maybe you don't go and get a guy who's quite as big as TJ Slayton, a guy who is, just a run stopper. I mean, preferably you like a guy who can do both, who can be someone that you can have on there, have out there consistently, not just on, likely running downs. And so Walter Nolan does look like a guy who can be effective in all areas. He's 6'3", 305 pounds. And here we have some stats from Bill Huber, who says, according to Pro Football Focus, 161 draft-eligible defensive tackles had at least 200 pass rushing opportunities. Nolan ranked 18th in pass rush win rate, 16th in pass rush productivity, which measures sacks, hits, and hurries per pass rushing snap, and 8th in pressures. He ranked 3rd among interior defensive linemen in tackles for loss. So this is a very disruptive player. And so with TJ Slayton gone, Kenny Clark, he didn't really have a great year last year. 1 sack. Wasn't as disruptive in years past. 29 years old. He's going to be 30 next season. Turning 30, I believe, around October. And so I expect Kenny Clark to still be here for a couple more years. But I do think if you're Brian Gutekunst, you have to envision, what your plan is once Kenny Clark is gone. Because if you look at Kenny Clark's contract currently, he is under contract through 2027. And so I don't think this is something where Kenny Clark's going to be gone soon. I still think he'll be here for a few more years, maybe 2 more years. Because if the Packers were to release him after this year, he'd have a $17 million dead cap hit. If after the next year, so I guess after the 2026 season, it's a $7.1 million cap hit. So if you can find a defensive tackle that could at least contribute in the next 2 years, and then if Kenny Clark were to leave after 2 years, he'd be around, 31, 32 at that time. I mean, that could be a time the Packers move off of him. You'd like to have someone ready to fill in. You'd like to not have to replace someone like a Kenny Clark, who has been a focal point of the Packers defense for a long time. You'd like to have someone maybe getting ready in the wings as you prepare for him to move on eventually. So maybe that is Walter Nolan. And if you look at the other defensive tackles that Brugler has with ranks inside the top 32 in round 1. Mason Graham, number 4. He's obviously not making it to the Packers. Derek Harmon, he could. He's ranked 16th. Kenneth Grant, 25th. So there are some options there with defensive tackles, and luckily all that I've heard is that, this is a very deep defensive line draft, which is very good for the Packers because in my mind, that is where they have the biggest need going into 2025. And so we'll see if Walter Nolan ends up on the Packers. Then another one, as Matt Schneidman mentioned, defensive end, so edge rusher, Jordan Burch. Dane Brugler has him as number 52 overall, 10th best edge rusher. He's 6'4", 279. Here's what Brugler said in his guide, The Beast. Burch is somewhat of a one-trick pony as a pass rusher who creates pocket push with power, although he has the athletic traits to be more if he improves his setup and secondary moves. He needs to be more explosive with his hands to shed blocks in the run game, but he showed much improved awareness and finishing skills on his 2024 tape. Overall, Burch is a smooth edge rusher in a defensive tackle's frame. He probably will never be a star in the league, but he has high floor talent with his NFL size, power, and movements. He projects as a scheme-versatile base end, and it wouldn't be a surprise if he has a similar NFL trajectory to that of John Franklin Myers. And so Gutekunst does seem, for the most part, when you look at the Packers and their defensive linemen, like Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness, to be a little bit thicker than guys like one guy I like a lot, James Pierce, who's around 245 pounds. He's on the smaller end. So based on Gutekunst's history, I do feel like he'd be more willing to pursue someone like a Jordan Burch in round 2, who is a little bit heavier, around 279. That sort of fits into what Gutekunst did, drafting Rashawn Gary first round, Lucas Van Ness first round. Now, I do think someone like James Pierce, as I've mentioned, he may be smaller, but he's been very effective as a pass rusher. And so I think these days I don't have a problem, with guys who are a little bit undersized. And we even saw with Brenton Cox, he's closer to like 245, 250, and he was one of the most effective Packers pass rushers later in the season, just on a per snap basis. So if guys are getting to the quarterback, I have no problem how much they weigh. The Packers seem to prefer the guys who are heavier so they can be someone that can, be effective against the run. I understand that. But anyways, Burch, he could be available round 2 with the Packers, having their second round draft pick there in the 50s. And so I think that when you look at this draft, I think that at least in the first 2 rounds, you need to at least get one defensive lineman. Now, the Packers have brought in some wide receivers like Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond. There's one other guy as well, forgetting right now. And so are they just doing that because, maybe they decide, maybe if a guy falls, are they really considering going wide receiver round 1? And I had read some information from Gutekunst in the past. I think it was one of his press conferences sometime this offseason that the Packers in the past have never necessarily discussed that they won't draft a receiver round 1. And it even sounds like at times they would have been willing, but certain guys didn't fall to them. And, Christian Watson, he was almost a first round pick. And so I don't think they're against it. But again, when you haven't drafted one in the first round in nearly 23 years, I feel like every single year when we talk about this, it's like, okay, maybe this is finally the year. They've brought some guys in. Maybe they do it. And as I've said before, eventually it's going to happen. Do I think it's going to happen this year? Probably not. Just going off history, odds are in my favor to make that claim, considering they haven't drafted one in 23 years. So if they do, it will be a surprise in my mind. And it does feel like, by the time we get to that point where we're like, the Packers are never going to draft a receiver. We've thought maybe in a few past years, maybe they would in round 1, and it's never happened. And it would make sense that the 1 year, maybe we start to go, you know what? They probably won't. They probably will. That's probably just how it'll happen here. But anyways, those are my thoughts. If you want more Packers draft content, feel free to subscribe down below. When it comes to draft weekend, I'll be out with all videos breaking down different prospects, different players. So make sure you have the post notifications turned on. That way you do not miss any Packers news or any Packers content. But that's all I have for this video. If you want to follow me on Twitter/X, you can follow me there at LukeBeller3. But thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you guys next time.